Tonight on Nightline, Gimme Shelter. Allegations of shocking corruption by top housing officials with millions wasted on belly dancers, secret lawsuits, and living space for the dead. Brian Ross investigates.
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran, Cynthia McFadden, and Bill Weir in New York City. This is Nightline, January 26, 2011.
Well, each year, about $26 billion in taxpayer money is spent to provide housing for needy Americans. At least that's how much is allotted for public housing. Where some of that money actually goes may, unfortunately, be another question. At least 43 local housing officials were convicted of crimes in the last 2 years, and some of the allegations are shocking. Tonight, Brian Ross is here with his investigation. Brian?
Cynthia, our Nightline investigation, conducted with the Center for Public Integrity, found that the federal housing program is plagued by theft and corruption and incompetence at local levels, spending millions of dollars on housing for sex offenders and dead people, and all too often failing the 3 million families who rely on federal housing for a clean, safe place to live. Officials in Washington have long praised the way the Philadelphia Housing Authority operates, apparently unaware or unconcerned that its executive director, Carl Green, was spending lavishly on parties, belly dancers and all, and used more than $500,000 in Housing Authority money to secretly settle a series of claims by female employees, with his own board later concluding Green was a true serial sexual harasser.
They asked him to dinner, drinks, under the guise of doing business. When he was rebuffed, they would then be isolated.
But that was hardly the worst of Mr. Green's legacy. The same month as his belly dancer party, 12-year-old Ebony Gage suffered a near-fatal asthma attack, brought on after her mother says poorly trained Housing Authority inspectors failed to properly check for dangerous black mold in her subsidized housing.
Nobody cared.
Years of unrepaired water leaks, she says, turned her home into a toxic pit full of the asthma-causing mold.
They ignored everything I said to them.
Ebony may never walk or talk again, and while the Housing Authority denied any wrongdoing or responsibility, it settled out of court for $9.6 million.
You go from looking at your 12-year-old dancing and talking and to the next day, you got a trach, a feeding tube, and you can't ever say anything.
Last fall, after a series of newspaper exposés on Green's mismanagement, wasteful spending, and personal financial trouble, Green was forced out of his $300,000 a year job that had made him a man about town, running the country's fourth largest public housing authority. Green would not talk with us, but his lawyer says the belly dancers were part of a diversity program. And Green told our station in Philadelphia his problems were not connected to his job performance.
I just want to assure everyone that this is really no bearing on the stewardship and management at PHA.
But now the FBI is investigating the Housing Authority, and prosecutors have issued a range of subpoenas.
We expect that the agency in Washington, D.C. ought to be making sure that every taxpayer dollar is spent in a responsible way.
Yet top officials in Washington at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, continue to praise Green's accomplishments.
I would say the Philadelphia Housing Authority did a good job.
Sandy Enriquez, the Assistant Secretary of Housing, says the focus on Carl Green overshadows a lot of good work, including several revitalized projects she recently toured in Philadelphia.
I just find it amazing that, the before and after.
But Enriquez was unaware of the case of Ebony Gage, or the $9.6 million payment because of the alleged failure of the Housing Authority to keep Ebony's home safe.
What about Ebony Gage?
That's a name that's not familiar to me.
She was 12 years old when she had an asthma attack, near fatal brain damage.
And which housing authority is this?
In Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
Enriquez finally acknowledged there might have been a problem in Philadelphia in Ebony's case, but maintained that overall, HUD is keeping a close eye on the country's low-income housing authorities.
I think a vast majority of housing authorities across this nation are doing a good job.
But our investigation uncovered a wide range of serious problems across the country. The Department of Housing Inspector General discovered that one top local official used taxpayer money to buy this million-dollar mansion in Florida, with his Mercedes and Lamborghini parked in front. All the property of Elias Castellanos, Chief Financial Officer for the New Orleans Housing Authority, convicted of embezzlement and sent to prison. One of at least 43 housing officials across the country we found convicted of crimes over the last 2 years.
Public housing often is the course of last resort for many people. And to take money away from them, is a sad commentary.
Inspector General Kenneth Donahue, who has since left his post, says corruption, fraud, and incompetence flourished as Washington housing officials were asleep at the switch.
We're failing these tenants, we're failing the taxpayers.
Incredibly, investigators found an estimated $7 million in payments to provide housing for dead people.
So was this incompetence or this was fraud?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both.
Investigators also found an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 registered sex offenders living in subsidized housing, courtesy of taxpayers, in violation of HUD's own rules.
I don't know exactly how that happened.
Somebody fell down on the job, right?
This is truly a difficult issue. What do our actions say when it comes to our attention? That is the bottom line.
But for too many housing residents, the bottom line remains one of neglect. For more than a decade, officials have promised action for the 320 families who live in the projects in Sanford, Florida, where in some places the walls were literally crumbling around them.
Mold, this old rotten wood. I'm just so ready to get out of here. Not being able to give my kids what they need, the good environment.
Late last year, after a decade of complaints and deterioration, officials finally deemed this place uninhabitable, and most of the families were moved out.
Where's the urgency? For the people living there, every day is really hell for them.
I do understand that. There is urgency. Trust me, there really is.
And now in Sanford, the correction will be to knock down most of the public housing managed or mismanaged by the local authority. Here and in so many other places, the slumlord has been the federal government. For Nightline, this is Brian Ross, ABC News.
So was this incompetence or this was fraud?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both.
This is truly a difficult issue. What do our actions say when it comes to our attention? That is the bottom line.
All new at 6 tonight, the scene is the Vista Sierra apartment complex, and this is on Fort Lowell between Campbell and Tucson Boulevard.
Question is, why did it shut down, and what are residents doing for housing? News 4's Greg Grando got some answers.
We didn't have any heat. The swimming pool was always filthy and dirty. The water lines here were either leaking or broken. You know, the heaters and the AC basically never worked.
Conditions are so bad they're beyond repair, but many residents say if things would have been done a long time ago, it would never be this bad.
But as bad as it is, many residents say it's still home and they didn't want to leave.
I wanted to spend the rest of my remaining life in peace. They didn't help. They didn't help.
Federal dollars were supposed to be provided to help them move, money some residents are yet to see.
They said they were going to get our money. They said they were going to give us this, give us that. They haven't given us 1 cent yet.
Maybe a few families here have gotten help, but not everybody, and that's what they promised, and that's wrong.
The man in charge of the relocating assistance declined an on-camera interview, but says everyone is getting paid. It's just taking a while because it's government funding. In Tucson, I'm Greg Grando, News 4 Tucson.
One woman says she's not getting the assistance she was promised by the city. Fox 11's Delane Cleveland explains.
The Vista Sierra apartments on Fort Lowell look like a ghost town these days. Units are vacant, much of the property is unkempt, and the office is permanently closed.
Well, we woke up one morning with notices on our door from the city stating that we had a limited amount of time to leave.
Tannywell Major is one of the few people still living at the apartment complex. She says all of the tenants have to relocate. Major's situation with her 4-year-old daughter has proved to be more difficult than she had hoped.
There were so many promises, but we've received no assistance whatsoever, and we've been told that we need to pay up front all the expenses associated with our move and then wait to be reimbursed.
But Major says she can't afford to pay any costs up front. She has no transportation, and efforts to contact people who could help her have only added to her frustration.
No one has responded, so I don't know what to do.
For now, Major and her daughter sit and wait for clarity in an otherwise uncertain future. Delane Cleveland, Fox 11 News.
I wanted to spend the rest of my remaining life in peace. They didn't help. They didn't help.